This episode of Everything is Awesome is brought to you by Tellist. Tellist is a fantasy world created by Michael D'Angelo. Spanning 15 novels and novellas, Tellist is a place of magic and splendor, where great heroes fight for the people. Some of these heroes are blessed with the strain, granting them uncanny abilities. The Tellist universe is medieval superhero fantasy with steampunk elements that mix with several different mythologies. With so much to choose from, the world is in your hands. Get more information, purchase the books, and discover the world of Tellist at Tellist.com.
This is a That's Entertainment podcast.
Awesome.
Just tell people they're awesome and mean it.
Awesome.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?
Awesome.
That was awesome. You guys are awesome.
No,
You're awesome. You are awesome.
sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I am your host, Kev, and this is the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. Wow, that was a tongue twister. I don't know why. It's been a hot minute since I've sat down to do a proper intro for a show, something that will be phased out in the next few episodes here. But 2019 has been the year of catching up. 2019 has been, and really the end of 2018. I don't know. Those of you that listen to some of the episodes, y'all know the end of 2018 rocked me pretty hard. It was the anniversary of my uncle's passing. At that point, it was he passed in 2016, so it was the second anniversary of his passing. And just a few days after that, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and then just a week or two later, we found out that it was a pretty bad diagnosis. That you know, again, if you've been listening more or less, I mean, it's still not great, but with proper medication, he can live a long, full life. But anyway, so it's been a hot minute since I've done one of these intros. I kind of had a mental break from that and just other things going on, and I have not done a lot of recording in 2019, save for some live shows, some panels, and stuff like that. And we have interviews that are, gosh, I don't know. I feel like this one was recorded in 2019, but probably not, because today's guest, I didn't officially meet at PAX Unplugged 2018. But I bought her game, and then we died, and tweeted about it, and that's how this interview came about. I think we recorded it, if not in like November or December of 2018. It was January of 2019. But we have, as you know, if it wasn't a buried lead, we have game designer Emma Larkins here. She's the host of Ludology and Table Takes. And in this week's episode, we chat about game design. She at the time had a few different games that she was working on, but we did hone in on And Then We Died as well, and talked about how that game isn't maybe just for adults. Maybe it can be used with kids and whatnot. And well, you'll listen to us talk about it. Make sure you check out Emma on Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch at Emma Larkins. That's EMMALARKINS. And of course, you can go to emmalarkins.com for more information. Let's not keep you here. I'm trying to keep these intros short and sweet. Let's get to my interview, my conversation with the one, the only, the great Emma Larkins right here on awesomepodcast.com. I guess it's a normal average evening for you. I'm Philadelphia based, so
nice.
It's 10:30 at night.
Oh, yeah.
And it's also freezing cold. And I don't know how clear I've made this to the listeners, but I record out of my Florida room, which is a great room in the summer. But at 10:30 at night, it's pretty cold. So, but you're based out of I know Pacific time. Is it California,
Seattle.
Washington?
Yeah.
Seattle. Okay.
Yeah. So
it's not. I was gonna say it's not always warm there, right?
It's nippy. It's like 50 degrees, which is, tough. Gets down to like 40 and everyone starts to grumble a little bit.
That's I wish I lived in that life where like, oh man, the worst it's gonna get is like high 40s, maybe mid 40s.
Yeah, I mean it's like it'll go down to freezing, but it never snows. It snowed like maybe once last year and it doesn't stick around. So it's pretty, I mean it's just like it gets dark because we're pretty far north. So the days are kind of very short. It's dark. It's always cloudy. But it's not super cold.
I'll tell you what, since like fall has started, or whenever we change clocks, whenever that happens.
No way to know.
November?
Sure.
That has been Philadelphia or the East Coast, or at least where I live. I go to work and I go to work pretty late in the morning because I have to drop my kids off at school. But I leave at 6:30. Sometimes I'll like walk outside just to get some fresh air at 4:30 and it's pitch black out. And I've never seen it that dark at 4:30 in the afternoon in the 34 years I've been alive.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So what's this is not a weather podcast, I swear, but what's the worst that happens in Washington?
Okay.
If it's, or Seattle?
Yeah. Well, maybe it's not a weather podcast, but people are very focused on the weather of Seattle. Everyone seems to have an opinion about Seattle and how much it rains here. It's really not that bad, especially summer. Like we're actually a very low humidity, like arid climate. So for basically the whole summer, like we're actually in a drought this summer because it rained maybe like 1 or 2 times. The winter is like drizzly and like, as I mentioned, 40s ish. So it's just,
you're selling me on Washington.
Yeah, I mean as long as you like have, honestly, people here, like I carry an umbrella because I used to live in New York City and I'm a huge dork, but everyone else, they just like have their jacket hood down, it's just lightly sprinkling, and it's nice.
Tornadoes?
What? Are you saying that because of the...
No, asking, question mark. Are there tornadoes?
Oh,
that's the complete question.
Apparently, yes. As of like a week ago, a tornado touched down in like a neighborhood and ripped the roofs off of like 3 houses.
All right, well, then I'm out.
So, I mean, I think a fluke because that was very bizarre.
Yeah. That's what I say about this area is that, listen, I hate the snow. I literally would rather deal with almost anything else except for tornadoes and earthquakes. And by golly, there were some earthquakes that we felt in the last few years. So I'm getting, I don't know where I'm going to move because I don't know where is safe.
Where is safe? Yeah, it's tough.
So are you born and raised from Washington?
No, I'm a pretty recent transplant. My partner recently become husband. We just got married less than a month ago. Got a job at Amazon. Thank you. He got a job at Amazon out here. We have a lot of friends who are already living out here. So we moved here from New York City about 2 years ago. And I had lived in New York City for a few years. But other than that, I've kind of lived a little bit all over the place.
Oh, okay. So origin point is mysterious because you've been all over.
Yeah, I never know whether to go into like the whole story because people are like, oh, where are you from? I'm like, well, and I like list off like 5 states and they're like, okay, that's a lot.
Well, okay. Well, this is the podcast to do it. This is where you're allowed to say anything and as much as you want.
California, Maine, Maryland, Virginia, New York, and now Washington.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say out of everything you just mentioned, the one that I like the least is Maine.
Really?
And that's because it's beautiful,
snow.
but it's a lot of snow.
Yeah.
Even more than here. I used to travel for work, so I've been lucky enough to like at least set foot in about 26 states, I think it was. Nice. And I have visited the entire original colonies and maybe even the whole East Coast. And my Maine, the reason I don't like it, it's beautiful. I can see the inspiration. I can see why people would go there to like write or just seclude themselves.
Yeah.
But like it was May and it was snowing and that ain't right.
It's just wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's the equivalent of 1 year. I don't know. Maybe you were on the East Coast when this happened, but it was like 2 or 3 years ago when, at least in Philadelphia, it was like 95 degrees on Christmas Day. I had to have the air conditioner on.
Right.
Yeah, that's the only time I want snow is on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day.
Just a dusting, make it kind of festive. Yeah, I mean, as far as Maine goes, I have good friends up there. I've had good times up there. But when people talk about the state, it's like the best they can say about it. It's like, it's pretty. It's really pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Bangor, Maine?
Yes.
Oh God, that's so far north.
Yeah. Well, okay. So when people are like, oh, you're from Maine, where from? I have to like work backwards because there's so many like townships. And my town had like 800 people in it. So I'm like, I'm from Orland. And they like blank. I'm like, it's near Bucksport, like blank. It's like, that's near Bangor. And they're like,
there you go.
Yes. So yeah, I lived about an hour away from Bangor.
I remember the first time I flew out there and I was like, Bangor, Maine. And it was like, the flight was ridiculously long for what I assumed like an East Coast flight to be. And like, I was like, this is crazy. And it's literally the furthest north you can fly in the United States before you hit Canada. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that doesn't include like Alaska. I guess Alaska's technically further north, but the continental. Yes. I don't think you can fly anywhere further north than Bangor, Maine.
Yeah. It's
I mean,
up there.
Don't take that as like fact. I mean, that's a good fact.
No, it's fact. It's in my brain now. So I believe this as truth.
100. I mean, it's true as far as any listener of this show is concerned. So what got you into game design? You know what? I'm sorry. I want to talk about that, but before we get there, you mentioned recently getting married. Yeah. And I did I saw when you first posted that, which I was like, oh, that's cool. And I didn't say anything because I figured we'd be talking at some point. And then I kind of really just looked at that tweet and that thread real good today, and it's like you stayed in like a fairy forest. It's that treehouse thing is amazing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Is it really like just like you're in a fantasy land? Like it feels like that's what it is.
Pretty much, yeah. It's kind of weird and wonderful how it all came together. So we got engaged this year at Gen Con, and so yeah, very short timeline. Neither of us is super traditional, so we're like, oh, we might have like a party for people at some point, but for the wedding, we just want to do something like really fun and nice, just something we can enjoy. So I had been talking to someone here, and they'd mentioned the tree houses, and I'm like, okay. To be fair, sorry, I undersold this. Someone was like, you can like go stay in tree houses, and I was like, I want to go to there because like trees, forests, the idea of tree house, like in love with it. I always wanted to like build tree houses growing up, so I was like totally sold. So I looked it up, and right there, like front page of the website, it's like elopement packages. Let us take care of everything and have a lovely day. Like, yes, sign me up for that.
I'm super intrigued by it because like I guess like kind of in the same boat. Like I guess I always wanted a treehouse, and I didn't really know it until I mean, I want to say right now, until
this moment,
because it's not. Yeah, because it's not. I mean, I don't think it's something you really think about. I'm an only child, so it's not something that I necessarily ever thought about because like no one I knew had a treehouse, so like it never was on my radar until like I don't know. I guess in shows and pop culture and stuff. But I mean that's. I don't think treehouse. I feel like it's way underselling what that palace is. Yeah,
it's not like a few planks, like rickety plants nailed to a tree. No, this is like because it's this guy Nelson, I forget what his first name is, but he's like literally the tree whisperer. He goes around the country making these like fabulous, amazing tree houses for people. He has a TV show, and I've heard people talk about the TV show where he just like leaps up into the tree and he's like, oh, this is a really good tree, I've got a vision. But yeah, it was heated, there was electricity, there was lighting. We got the fancy one that even had a bathroom in it. So
it just seems very dangerous. Everything except for maybe the bathroom, everything else seems very dangerous to have near wood.
Yeah.
and
Fair.
leaves
Oh
and
my
a
gosh, yeah.
forest.
The thing you don't know until you spend a night in a tree house is trees move a lot.
Oh my
'cause
God.
it was super windy that weekend. So we were just in it and like the whole thing would shake. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's an earthquake. And then, oh no, wait, I'm in a tree. I guess trees just move. And we'd hear noises. And it's like, are you like shaking your chair or something? It's like, that's not me, that's the tree. The tree is like communing with us right now.
All right, I might be out. If it's earthquake-esque, I might be out. But
it's a little shaky.
It definitely is something that's like I wish was closer to the East Coast. I went on a deep dive. I went on a I don't typically go on deep dives for interviews because I like to have a natural conversation.
Yeah.
But I did want to do a little bit of a deep dive because like other than the game and then we died, like I literally didn't know much about you. So let me do a little deep dive.
Yeah.
Just like a tiny. And then I went on the biggest deep dive of this treehouse and like visited the website.
Yeah.
I went to all the sub websites for all the different locations.
Yeah.
And like, now it seemed like yours was a little bit like a cozy place, like
Yeah.
a nice place for two people.
Yeah.
But there's like mansion treehouse this guy has built.
Yeah.
It's insane. I want to watch a show.
Right?
I was instantly like, just like in love with the concept at least. But okay, so now we got that was my big concern. I wanted to get to that within this hour of conversation.
Got to cover the tree houses.
The important stuff is out. Let's talk about the fun stuff with game design.
Yeah.
So when did like the love for games, whether it be just as like a player or a designer, what happened first? I have to assume as a player. But like when and like what game like really made you fall in love with like being a board game person or a tabletop person, I should say.
Because I always have to say games in general, I have to give a call back just forever. We were lucky to have mostly starting with digital games because tabletop as it exists right now is really very modern. Only within the last 20 years and more so even the last like 7 years has it become what it is, what we know today as the board game hobby. So I think a lot of gamers came to it either from role-playing, D&D, which has been around for a while, or from the digital side of it. As far as it's interesting because I kind of came to board game design and board game playing simultaneously.
Oh, okay.
Because I know a lot of people I know in the hobby and the industry have been serious gamers for years and years. Just been doing this forever. And for me, I only really started playing modern tabletop games like 3 or so years ago.
Oh, wow.
3?
Newbie.
Yeah, I'd say like maybe 5-ish years ago. Because it's Phil, my husband, who started to get me into the tabletop side because I was always been a digital gamer, like played pretty much everything under the sun, and I even was running a digital game designer community when I was in New York City. So I was even in the digital design side of it and still not really like playing a lot of tabletop games. And Phil, when we met, like he was actually working on and is still working on tabletop game design. So I was able to see the project that he was working on. So like, oh, that's interesting. And he had the shelf, that I have, now we have the shelf, but back then, it's like, if you have the shelf, some people there's a Monopoly and there's, an Uno or something, but he had the full shelf. And I was like, I would see it at his house and we played a lot more digital games together, but eventually started working into some of these tabletop games. And I think the big early one that had a really important impression on me was City of Iron by Ryan Luckett. Mm-hmm. That was an experience because never played. Do you know Ryan Luckett and the Red Raven games?
No. So my background with tabletop games is actually even like way more novice than you.
Okay.
Probably your start.
Yeah.
So no, I know. I'm a like tabletop gamer through like role playing games and board games and card games.
Yeah.
Like I'm more of an enthusiast than I am. Like this 2019 is my year where I want to like really get into the community. Like I've been to PAX Unplugged the last 2 years now. And this past year was like such a wonderful experience compared to the first year. And they treated everybody and I brought my son on Sunday, so like treated everybody, especially the kids on Sunday, super, super good.
Nice.
And like I said, I mean, I've played obviously board games since I was a kid, but never anything like God, the craziest board game I played as a kid. Maybe like Risk, like nothing out there,
right.
And even as an adult, like I would say more recently, just from like finding Kickstarters and stuff. Like Kickstarter's been huge in that market. Is like Exploding Kittens, the card game. My son wanted for Christmas, so we got him for that.
Nice.
And he like a fun little game. I don't know if it's appropriate for a 7-year-old, but we got the family version.
Yeah.
We didn't get the not safe for work version.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to like there's definitely some other like random card games, and definitely like more recently role-playing games have been a much bigger factor. Like I guess like Doctor Who is something that I played a few times.
Nice.
Star-Crossed I played very recently. And then of course like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. But that's even though I have a lot of like digital manuals for role-playing games, and I have some other like we actually have a nice little collection of board games because of PAX Unplugged, and us finding stuff like this Christmas was kind of like a very tabletop Christmas.
Nice.
We just have to like sit down and dive into stuff. But I was always a video game player when I was a kid, more so than anything else. So that was the really long-winded way of saying no, I don't know who Ryan is. Or so please explain.
So let me paint you a word picture, because this is like the reason I ask is because Ryan in particular as a designer goes big. So these are like your kitchen table just covered in like, there's a big board and little boards, and there's piles of bits here and piles of bits here, and the book is like a D&D player's manual, basically the rule book for this game. You're just sitting like, this is a lot of stuff. I don't know if we're gonna figure out, these things don't seem to even what is this like face thing, I don't know what this is. So and Phil being more of a tabletop gamer, like, and together, like it was just the two of us too, you know, like a lot of times when you're coming into the hobby, you have more people to guide you a little bit, but just like working through this rule book, we figured out, you know, we played the game. It took us at least 3 hours, maybe 4 hours. And I sat back after, I was just like, my brain was melted. Like it never, not even like taking quizzes or tests or anything, had I felt just so thoroughly just done. Melted, I think is a good term, but in a positive way. It's like going to the spa, you know, for like 10 hours, and you just soak there, and you come out, and it's just like everything is a race. Like like going on a really good run or something, you know, just everything is aligned, all your particles, like your brain just can't think anymore. So everything is just like nice and quiet and silent. And
it's the closest experience I have to that, off the top of my head, is I'm not a big like spa guy. I'm not a big massage guy. I don't really like being touched in that way, especially by strangers. But I forget why. I guess my fiance just had like an extra credit for her massage place. So we went and she's like, all right, we're not going to get a couple's room because that's weird. I was like, I'm not going unless it's not like, I'm not going to be in a strange room with a stranger by myself. And we made a night of it. And it was, I've only been twice now, but it definitely like, I left feeling super relaxed. And I mean, I'm a guy, I used to like do WWE style wrestling in the backyard, and also was trained somewhat professionally and did it locally here in the the Bucks County area of Philadelphia, the suburb. So like I have probably 15 years of like taking bumps and just a lot of pain on my back. So like it was such, it was that feeling, that mind melting feeling, but in a positive way. And it's I guess like really good storytelling can get me there.
Yeah,
But it's got to
yeah,
be really, really good
yeah.
storytelling, and I can see how like a game could totally make someone feel that way.
And it's interesting too, because I think a lot of people who come to the hobby are looking for that experience in particular, or other people are looking for, you know, the wacky exploding kittens experience.
Yeah, yeah.
But what, and especially, you know, taking on trying new board games as a practice, and like kind of forcing myself to keep trying new games and working at the board game store and like seeing all these games over time more and more. It's not just that like, oh, they have this one experience. It's all about like melting your brain. It's just that tabletop games have so many experiences. So like that was the first of many very different experiences, but all with this underpinning of being in a shared space, being interacting like live in real time with other people.
Yeah, and I mean, what I love about tabletop gaming, whether it be board game, card game, or role playing game, is that, and especially seeing my son take to it so much this year at PAX Unplugged, is like it kind of harkens back to when I was a kid. Like I said, I was a video game kid, but quite honestly, like I was also very much a board game kid. Now, like you said, I think back, at least when I was a kid, you know, board games were, at least my parents maybe weren't in the know, so they weren't like anything fantastical like Exploding Kittens or Settlers of Catan. At least not in my life. Like it was Monopoly, and it was Life, and it was you know, just all the standard games that like most kids play at some point in their life, or most people, I should say. Most people play at some point in their life. But like that was a very big part of my life. That Magic the Gathering was also like a big part of my teen years or my preteen years.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So and when I was a kid, and I keep saying that because I just naturally assume I'm always a decade older than everyone I talk to. But when I was a kid, like video games were around, yes, but aside from video games, there wasn't like all these different options like Netflix. Like,
yes. Oh yeah, exactly.
Watch it like on demand. Even like on demand wasn't a thing. If you wanted to watch a show, you had to be at your TV at a certain time.
Oh my gosh, now I feel old. Yeah.
Yeah, unless you had a VCR or something like that. But yeah, I mean, so there wasn't as many choices when I was a kid. That's why I think board gaming was like has a bigger role in my mind than I see it now. Like I see how it can not be part of someone's life pretty easily because there's just so much to choose from.
Yeah.
And maybe like that's kind of why there's such a robust tabletop like community now, is because there's so much to choose from outside of board games that you need something to like draw people in that has maybe a different hook than Monopoly. And just seeing, like, my son is 6, he'll be 7 actually at the time of this recording. He'll 7 in about a week. And but seeing, like, going to PAX Unplugged, and we went in like the kids learning area the first part of the day, and like he fell in love. We played a couple games, but he fell in love with this little card game called Spot It. So, and it was a fun game, but he got into it. Like him and this other kid, my friend's daughter, like they were like raging against each other. They were so into it. And they were only playing like with a one style of it. And it was just such a neat experience. And then like going to the game library, and I forget what games we got out from the library, but like seeing like him just kind of fall in love with board games. Like I was like, I really can't wait to go next year. Hopefully as like more than I was part of the media this year. I'm hoping to go as like something bigger in 2019 if I actually get off my butt and do stuff. But regardless, like I can't wait to go, and like my daughter, who is going to be 5 in May, like she was like, well, I want to go next year. And so like while the first 2 days will very much be just a Kev day, Sunday is going to probably be the whole family, which is so cool. Like that's, I think, what at the heart of tabletop gaming, it's about family, and that doesn't mean like actual blood family. Like I think everyone knows family can be, close friends. It's more than just blood.
And it's just that feeling that you're describing, because I have some of the games that I'm working on are more targeted towards a kids or family audience, and just seeing, first of all, first of all, how freaking smart some of these kids are with the games, and just like their level of knowledge and like knowing how the stuff goes and seeing them get excited about something. Kids just get so excited. You know, one of the games I was testing at PAX Unplugged, a family came by who was actually there last year and played the game. This dad and 2 daughters, and they came by again this year to play my game specifically in the Unpub hall. And I was like, well, just so you know, it's changed, because that's how game design works. It changes over time. It's not going to be the same game. But luckily, they still really enjoyed it, and just saying things like, I want to play this game like 10,000 times, and, you know, in the way that kids do. So it's just so gratifying to see them. And I think, too, like, you know, video games have always been in this weird space. I'm not sure about you, but for me, my parents had kind of a love-hate relationship with it. It's like, well, it keeps them entertained, but they're on there for so long, and, you know, starting to screen. I don't know how I feel, kind of like mixed emotions. Whereas for tabletop games, there's really nothing to be mad at, unless your kid wants to play Sushi Go 300 times in a row, and eventually you might get bored of it. But there's just nothing to... You're together, you're hanging out, you're not fighting, hopefully. So
I try and think, like, looking at, I don't think there was ever like any kind of relationship when it came to video games with my parents, because like I grew up on, quite literally grew up on video games. Like I think the Nintendo came out the year I was born. So, you know, or at least around about that time. So like, and I remember very specifically as a kid, like an Atari being in my house when I was like 3, maybe like, I want to say 3 years old. I know it's hard to say like you have this memory when you're 3, because like you don't really have memories when you're that young. But I was under the age of 7. I know that. And I remember my parents playing some like game where you have to break out of jail or something on this Atari. So my parents, and that was their video game experience. Like they didn't really go beyond the Atari. So for them, it was like a novelty. And then when I was when I was born and interested in video games, I think I just had a really healthy relationship. Like I think I played a lot, but again, I also like interacted with friends. Like I remember very specifically being outside running around until, you know, 9 o'clock at night, which is, you know, insane. I don't know why my parents let me stay out that late. As an elementary school kid, I would never let my kids stay out that late, but and maybe it was the summer, but even that, like it's, I don't know, different times in 2018, but like very much in the late 80s, early 90s, I was outside running around a lot, as well as playing video games a lot. So like, I think I just happened to have a healthy relationship with it, where I played a lot, but I also did other things and had good grades, and you know, wasn't like on drugs. So like my parents were
check, not on drugs.
So I mean, like all the check marks of having a good kid, I guess like I hit, you know. So save for that one time, like, the few times I drank underage, like that was the only that I know of, the only disappointment they've ever told me to my face. I'm sure there's plenty that they've never told me about, but yeah. So I do get the, because like that's as a parent now, like I live in that world of like balance. Okay, like I understand playing. I played video games all the time as a kid, and I turned out fine. And again, I mean, my fiance would probably have something else to say about that, but you know, fine-ish at the very least. So as a parent, I understand that fine balance. And for me, like even if it's the dullest board game, I'd rather my kid want to play that 300 times than want to sit down and play Fortnite for 3 hours straight, or to play I'll even go to a game that I like, Castle Crashers. Like I love Castle Crashers, but I don't want to sit around. Well, I want to sit around and play it for 3 hours, but I don't want my kid to sit around and play it for that long. So it's I think so when you're designing games, like because very obviously the game that I purchased and then we died is not a kid game. But so where, and I do want to very specifically talk about that game, because I have yet to play it. We actually have a game night with friends set up like in the next month or so that I very much plan on bringing that game to play. Nice. But and I'm excited to play it. But what's like the difference? How do you approach game design when you're designing for adults or designing for kids,
Yeah.
especially like, I mean, I'm only assuming you don't have kids. So like, I mean, okay, I don't want to be assumptuous. Do you have kids?
I do not have kids yet.
Okay. So especially like when you don't have kids,
Yeah.
I imagine it might be even harder to design in that mindset, but you tell me.
Yeah, first it's interesting that you say not that and then we died is not a game for kids, because I definitely think it's not something that I would market towards kids, or like that would be the target audience for it. But I know me growing up, like I read Goosebumps. I used to read just like not horror stuff, but creepy stories, and kids are, for better or worse, fascinated by death. You know, they're kind of starting to figure it out. They're starting to ask questions. And with it being this kind of not making light of death, but it's kind of you're telling this absurdist story together collectively, and then having some sort of dramatic ending to it. I think one thing that's been really nice for the adults, I usually do playing tests with adults for the game. It's a little bit of, you know, absolution of kind of, you know, like our collective dread of this experience, and to be able to just like talk about it, poke at it, examine it a little bit. I think it's something that kids do all the time, even though it's not necessarily something we want to be like, well, we don't want kids to think about death or worry about death, but you know, something they talk about in like stories. And the interesting thing about And Then We Died Too is like, it, at least for the people I've played with, it's not really gruesome, you know. And for anyone listening who doesn't know the conceit of it, it's like you're using these cards to make words and then point to someone, they have to work the word into the story. So you might think like, oh, you know, someone might say like, oh, and someone came and, you know, like tore everyone's head off and there's blood everywhere. Like I've never actually had a story like that. It's more just behind the scenes kind of thing. Like we jumped through an interdimensional rift and, you know, sadly our molecules were torn asunder or something. It usually tends to be a little more poetic. So I think it's interesting. I think kids are very aware of these things and interested and can handle. And I think it can be healthy, you know, for kids to do this. But on the flip side of that, there is the perception of it. Something you had mentioned, Exploding Kittens, I believe, earlier.
Yeah.
And the target audience, like, what is the age for this? And this is something, you know, I have parents come into Mock's boarding house. They're like, is this appropriate for my child or my niece or whatever? It's like, that is a very you question. Like that for some parents are just like, you know, I'll mention, they might not know about the game. And like, well, just so you know, it's got kind of like this theme to it. And there's like there's a bomb shaped cat and stuff. And some parents are like, okay, why would I care about that? And then other parents are like, oh, I don't know, you know, that doesn't really seem appropriate. So there's such a huge range of parenting styles and what parents are comfortable with. So I think that's the main thing with designing for family target versus not family target. It's more about the perception and the comfort level that the parents will have with the perception of it. You know, not even the gameplay. Like the kids will love it. I guarantee you, like the Exploding Kittens, all the kids love those kinds of things, but the parents aren't always so cool with it.
Well, and I think maybe I misspoke a little bit about you know, and then we died not for kids. Like I have like, I guess different definition, like, and it will change day to day for kids. Like I look at it as like, I think that's a game that's perfectly like playable by, you know, 5th or 6th graders and up. And they are very much kids. Absolutely, they are kids. They're not even preteens at that age. I guess they kind of are, but they're not anywhere near being a teenager or like really having any kind of control in their life. They're just kind of, you know, getting to that point of where like they're realizing what money's worth and that stuff. So when I say games for kids, I'm probably always imagining like your 1st or 2nd graders and younger. And then like to me, that's one group. with like the 3rd through 5th graders kind of being in this like aloof group where they could go either way.
Yeah.
And then you have your 5th/6th graders and older that are like just another tier where obviously depending on the maturity of the game and the kid themselves, it would depend. So like because like my son who's going to be 7 is very into Goosebumps, or at least into the idea of Goosebumps, because like he's just learning to read and well, I shouldn't say just, I mean he's been reading for a while, but like he's and I don't know what Two Blue means, but he just got bumped up to Two Blue. It's like a step below chapter books, I think.
Okay.
And like he can pick up like a chapter book and read maybe like 80% of the words or something. Nice. And so he loves the idea of Goosebumps. He loves the idea of us reading him Goosebumps books. He's watched the first movie, as in the Jack Black one on Netflix. He's watched that, and like he's perfectly fine with like that kind of slapstick horror. But like my son is someone who maybe, and I don't even know yet, but maybe he just got comfortable with the idea of guns, and like was always okay with it in a video game, but if we turned on a movie or a TV show with a gun, like would freak out until very recently. And so, and he would, and very much was like I wouldn't be surprised if he's like his mom and it has high anxiety levels when he's older and stuff. Like he's very much in that mode. So like, and then We Died is not a game I would introduce to him. Probably even when he's 10. My daughter, on the other hand, who is not even 5 yet, I think I could probably introduce it to her now because she is a monster and the devil reincarnated. But so yeah, I think that I guess I don't know a better way to. I guess you kind of phrased it better when family games versus non-family games. So because kids can play non-family games.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So that's more so what I meant than kids versus not kids.
Well, I am like the idea kids playing games. You know, I'm very passionate about this idea of like getting together, like just seeing them so passionate and excited about these things. And because, Phil, my husband, his mom came out here. She loves playing my games and testing them. I didn't think she'd be the target audience for And Then We Died, but she wanted to play it. So we went through it, and she's mostly cool with it. But for his niece, she's like, I don't think that would necessarily be a good fit for her. So it really got the wheels turning. And, I want to have that storytelling experience for a family audience. So I'm working on this other idea called roughly, you see what happened was based on something that my friend's 5-year-old likes to say when he asks her, like, what happens? Like, where are all your French fries? And she launches into this like elaborate 5-year-old storytelling mode, which you might be familiar with. And just all this stuff starts coming out. So using the same format of the cards, but having it be like, you make a word, it's like door. It's like, mom wants to know what happened to the door. And then from there, using the words to kind of build up this elaborate story. So I'm excited to test it out in a more family-friendly way.
Oh my God, because that would, like, my son, the one thing, besides his looks, which is not a good thing that he gets from me, the one other thing he gets from me, because he's very much his mom attitude-wise, but is his love of his own voice. I mean, there's a reason I have a podcast, or I've been podcasting for like 11 years, and often don't let my guests talk that much, is because I love conversation and I love listening to people, but I just have a lot to say, because I'm always usually interested in whoever I'm speaking with. And so that's, 100% my son is, maybe not with the see what happened was phrasing, but totally will be like, hey, Dad, let me tell you this. And then like 10 minutes later, I'm like, so what's the point, dude? Like you had lunch with Michael C? Okay. That's 2 seconds. We got it done in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
This whole tale. Yeah. So that's pretty exciting to hear, like the family friendly version of that, or like the younger kid version of that.
Yeah. Or even just people, not everybody Like the death one is
Yeah.
it's just funny. It's always funny, but some people don't. Yeah.
Well, and like I'm really excited to play that game because I guess I got an email from through like the PAX Unplugged media list about that booth. What was the publisher's booth again?
Killjoy.
Yes, Killjoy.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's like a name of a Kevin Smith movie that he's making, and it's
yeah.
And like that. I was very much in the market for like talking with people that were doing role-playing games because that's kind of like my huge focus right now. Even though like on Sunday, it was actually the opposite. My huge focus was actually like actual board games and whatnot. So when I saw that game and like went on a deep dive on it, I was like, oh, this is kind of like that. Like a lot of the games that Killjoy has here are just like micro RPGs really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I'm super excited to sit down and play it, especially since like I am kind of that person who's like never really reconciled with the idea of I'm going to die one day. Like right. At 34 going on 35, like I very much know that it's coming closer. And like two years ago, almost 2.5 years ago, we lost my uncle who was like a big brother to me. He would have been 50 in 2018, December of 2018. And he passed just before that in 2016. So he's 47 from cancer. And so like that rocked me to my core. When Robin Williams passed, like that was the first like celebrity death that like meant something to me. So like very much in the last like 5 to 10 years, the idea of death has come up a lot for me. And it's like, I actually had a really cool conversation in the first year that I did this podcast with Erin McGathy, who, for those that don't know, she is a comedian originally from the LA area, now in Dublin, Ireland. And she's also a podcaster, though I don't think she's actually released an episode in quite some time, but she was like kind of one of my podcast role models that I was like super stoked to have on the show. And in Ireland, like they don't do death the same way we do over here. Like it's more of like a happy, smiling celebration of one's life.
Yeah.
And like that was such an eye-opening experience to me that like I need to find out a way to, because I don't want to die. Like I never want to, like I want to find a way to live forever because I know that comes with a lot of consequences of like watching everyone you know and love die. But like, and I don't know what this says about me, but like, I don't want to die. And I don't, and maybe I'd be different if I saw someone that I did see someone that I love die. But very much like that doesn't change my mind that like, and maybe it's because I feel like I have so much to do in my life that I have the feeling of not wanting to die. But I feel like a game, like, and then we died kind of can be like almost therapeutic in a way.
Yeah. It's this idea of coming, like glancing up against something, you know, you're never really staring at it full in the face. And honestly, for most of the game, it's like, you know, it's like, oh, and then we died. We're playing as ghosts, trying to figure out how we died so we can pass on to the other side. And it's not hanging over your head. It's like, you know that at the beginning, but then you tell this whole wacky story and it's not about death at all. Honestly, like the stories are just the most fantastical, whether it's like, rituals or bears in the woods or traveling into space, you know, it's always this just amazing journey on you play as a group of friends, you go on an amazing journey together, and then eventually the journey has to end, you know, as all journeys end, and then it's funny and thoughtful. People sit back and just have a kind of like a moment. It's like, we just did that. And you're not really thinking, honestly, most of the time about like death or even like looking at it. You're like, oh, we just like told a story together. But I think just being able to say the words sometimes, it's like, and then we died, you know, just like saying those words can be helps, you know. A lot of times the things that stress us out or scare us or anxious about, or we just can't talk about them, we hide them, you know, we don't share them with the people in our lives. And just like kind of talking about death but in a silly way, it's relieving.
Yeah, and I think that's like and honestly, like going back to my son, who I think has like it's such a I think would be a touchy subject with him. I actually think it would be like maybe he needs to be a little bit older to handle it, but like I think it's totally a game that like would be beneficial to sit down and play with him in some manner. Like if especially like, and I say that like he kind of is getting better with things, but like you know, depending on how he develops in the next few years, it totally could be a game that like helps him. Especially like I said, I'm very excited to sit down and play it when we have our friends game night in the next month or so. Because like it spoke to me when I saw it in that email. It was very much out of all like the marketing that was done for PAX Unplugged and all the emails that were sent to the media. Killjoy was really the only role-playing game stuff sent out to the media, at least to me. Maybe there was other media that got other emails. I don't know how that works, but and I mean really like and maybe I didn't pay attention enough walking the floor, but it seemed like there like, you know, my definition of tabletop, I think, is actually kind of warped in the sense because of podcasts, because of actual play podcasts. It is, you know, I think a lot of people who are coming into the hobby, especially if they're coming through podcasting, they hear tabletop, and I think they might actually be thinking tabletop role playing games like D&D or Dungeon World or something. Yeah. But PAX Unplugged is very much not that. Like, I mean, it is. There's that part of it's very much there and thriving, but it's so much more and so much like more like I said, my first year at PAX Unplugged, I was a paying customer that year. I actually very much hated it. Like it was not the time for me. But they did listen to everyone that responded to their survey, and they made a lot of changes, I think, that were super beneficial. Like it was a 180 experience for me at PAX 2018. And I loved going around playing games and talking to, you know, some game designers and other podcasters and like just hanging out with my son for a day. And so, I think it's exciting to see that the fact, like, I'm kind of just realizing this year that when I go to PAX Unplugged or I go to something that's tabletop involved, it's very much more than just role-playing games. And there's a like, so what else are you know, we talked about And Then We Died, which, you know, one more thing on that, like, where did that idea come from, like with using the tarot cards and then fragmented words? Like what brought that idea on before you kind of move on to some final questions?
As with more and more of my ideas I'm finding from dreams. It seems almost corny to say it, but I don't know what happens in my head at night, but I wake up and sometimes it's terrible because I'm like, I need 3-sided cards, like a playing card, but instead of having 2 sides, it has 3 sides, so I can flip it over another time. And my logical brain is just like, what? Why? But some of the stuff is good. For the tarot in particular, that was all Killjoy. The art and the style of it, when I was playtesting it, I had it on just look like crumpled pieces of paper, like you were in just a cabin in the woods and you were finding someone's journal or something.
Oh,
so
that's kind of neat.
Yeah. So it was, theme, like story wise, like mechanics wise, I very early on, originally I wanted to have people seeing visions in like pictures, because the whole game kind of came from this idea of like it's creepy and you're like seeing things. You can't quite figure out what it is, but you're seeing something, you're trying to figure it out. And I couldn't figure out how to make it work with pictures, but then I was like, well, people see words and letters, so if they just put letters together, they're going to see words, so it's going to have that mechanic to it. And I just took it in so many directions. Like at one point you were locked in a cabin with these ghosts and the ghosts are trying to speak through you. At another point you were on the banks of the river Styx and it was competitive. You were trying to barter for the coins so you could travel over the river Styx. Because I'd done so many things, you know, I hadn't really settled on the theme idea for it. So with Killjoy coming in and being able to say like, hey, tarot cards, you know, this is recognizable but also open source, so it's something that we can use. And this idea of seeing visions, it like people look to tarot cards to be inspired and get inspiration for tarot readings from, but it's like, hey, what if you're looking into the cards and like a Ouija sort of a sense, like speaking with the dead, except you're the dead. So it's all these different cool layers to it.
And that's something that didn't even cross my mind as far as like the design element of this game, and like the fact that it could take it wasn't like this from the beginning.
Yeah.
I recently had Jeff Stormer on, who's a buddy of mine, but he's also the designer of Mission Accomplished, a tabletop RPG game that recently funded on Kickstarter. And I had him on to very specifically talk about that and the design process. And yeah, I mean, of course that game wasn't always on tarot cards, and of course it wasn't a collective story game. It was at one point a competitive game like that.
Yeah.
So how, and this is, I think, like something that like I have trouble reconciling when I'm sitting down with an idea to like, hey, I want to design a game. Here's like my baseline idea. And then I put it away for a couple of months because like I just have so much going on in my head because I can't prioritize anything because I'm a man child. But like, I think the like dirty little secret about game design that like no one ever says, I think, is like, hey, it's going to take a really long time, and whatever idea you have is probably not going to be anything like it ends up being. So like, how long was this game? Like, when did you start with And Then We Died?
Oh my gosh. Well, back then it was called Confabula Rasa.
Yes, I did see that on I guess your website on mlarkins.com.
Yeah. I think from start to finish it was about 3 years, because it was, oh man, I remember because I was working my first game, Heart Catchers, and that had been kickstarted and was like getting ready to be published. And I had a brief stint where I was like, I had been working at a billiards parlor, and it was before I got my job working as a video game marketing person, and didn't have a lot going on for a couple of months. And that kind of arose in that time period. So it did that. I got the marketing job, and so I really didn't have a chance to work on it for a year, and then kind of came back to it and really started grinding on it. And as you said, that's the secret to game design, is grind, just like play testing, because you have to like get the idea out, produce it, make it playable, put it in front of people. Inevitably just shatters every vision you had that something would work. Take it back in your like wounded soul, put it back together, do it again, just over and over and over again. It takes a lot of time.
I never had a wounded soul quite yet from, and I'm not going to even say game design, because that's like a really poor thing for me to say about what I'm working on. But like I had this, excuse me. I wanted to work on this role-playing game system because it's something I'm just big in. And I kind of wanted, for a podcast that I used to do that I'm rebooting as a actual play podcast at some point, like I was like, let me just like design something from the ground up. And like literally said it like that, like, oh, let me just design something from the ground up. And like, I was like, I want to do something that's like easy mechanics, blah, 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 blah. And for like a year, me and my friend were talking back, like literally just talking about it back and forth. And then I finally just like said, this is bullshit, it's not going to work. And just threw like a notebook away that I had full of notes. And then like just very recently said like, maybe like for my first thing, I should just like look at like adapt, like Powered by the Apocalypse, for instance. Like that's like, maybe that's the route I need to take as like a first time like designer. And then of course, like on Twitter, I saw something very recently that like is like a quick little contest to submit for on itch.io, and I was like, oh, and I came up with an idea for that I'm in the process of writing, but I have to be very quick about it because I have like less than a week to submit it, but like, so that I'm not going to be able to throw anything away. But like, yeah, like it didn't crush my soul because like I say, like I threw a whole notebook of notes away, but like literally it was just like notes that had scrambled. Like I scribbled things out, and then there was another page I scribbled things out. So it was just like I never could land on something that felt like it would work, like and whatnot. And I guess I was doing game design and not really realizing it.
Absolutely.
But it is like it's just. Do you work on like multiple projects at once? Because it seems like it would be entirely frustrating to, as a creative person, have like only the ability to output something every like 1 to 3 years. And I say that as a podcaster who tries to I try to put something out at least once a week. So that like, and that's my angle from being a creative personality is like, oh, I can get something out once a week. That's why my game design has to happen in a week.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. That's, especially if you want to make a living off the game design, you definitely need to make something more frequently than 1 to 3 years. And for that project in particular, there was like a whole year span and then multiple month chunks where there's literally no motion on it.
Okay.
While I say that, like you were saying, oh, you threw the notebook away. It's like, that's kind of okay, because the important part of it was you thinking about it, you talking about it. Like these things are still moving around in your head.
Yeah.
Like that's where the design happens, is in your head. You know, you have to play test it and, you know, work out the mechanics of it in meat space, I guess. But a lot of stuff is going on even when there isn't necessarily, you know, visual like evidence of stuff happening. So I definitely have multiple things going on depending on the stages of development. They're all very different. So like ideation, you can just sit there, like pop out 10 ideas in half an hour. You know, that happens very fast. For the first prototyping, that can happen very fast. And then like the testing of it and sending off to publishers, you're not doing anything, you know, you're just kind of waiting to get feedback. So there's a lot of different phases, and having different projects in those different stages can kind of have you always coming back to something. I actually just yesterday had an experience that brought it all back to me, because I'm still working on my game, Abandon All Artichokes, this kid's family game that I'm working on. And that's been in development. So I've been just honing that like hardcore for a year, just like test after test, and haven't gotten a lot of new stuff going. And feeling kind of bad about it, you know, because I'm like, I need to like fill up my pipeline. I need to just like have stuff going. But I'd fizzled a couple of things and was feeling pretty bad about it. And I was like, I'm not doing anything, you know, just frustrating. Like, why aren't I doing anything? And then a publisher actually reached out to me and said like, hey, you know, what are you working on now? I want to see some of your stuff. I'm like, shoot, I'm not going to not have something to show them. So just that impetus. And like I said, like that buildup of just you're working on things in the background, even when you don't have anything to show for it. And over the span of an hour, like I had a game.
Damn.
Yeah. And it was a distillation of an idea I'd been talking about with Phil and with some other people for a couple of days. And again, having that experience and play testing a lot and having your brain just like, it's a skill, you know, it's something that you can get better at over time. So I could actually able to produce something testable in a very short period of time. So it does take a long stretch sometimes, but the actual actions of game design can happen pretty quickly. And that's what's great about tabletop as opposed to digital. You know, digital takes time to produce something playable, whereas tabletop, you can make a prototype in an hour.
Yeah, and I have a buddy, Mike D'Angelo, who created this game called Quantum Quest, and it's kind of like a dungeon crawl, like a roguelike dungeon crawl game, kind of inspired by Boss Monster and whatnot. And it's that design. I mean, God, I forgot like that I'm actually pretty in the know about this stuff because he's my best friend and I was part of it. I'm part of like his journey for like 5 years of designing this game. But yeah, I do remember very like one of the first play tests we did was in a Red Robin on like index cards. And that's what I love about and I'm sure not all game design is like this, especially like in the major companies and publishers and stuff. But I'm you know, I grew up watching Kevin Smith, so I'm a big indie fan. Like I love indie. Like I'd much rather listen to local unsigned bands or just unsigned bands in general than like anything in the mainstream. Not that I'm a big music guy, I'm more of a talk guy anyway. I'd much rather listen to like independent podcasts, even though I do listen to some of the major podcasts. And I do very much love like the independent game publishers. And I think why I love independent, and I think it harkens back to when I was a wrestler and an independent wrestler, is that it's just so hardcore. Like it's grungy, I guess. I mean, I guess that's where it kind of originated with the punks, and I just love how, you're right, how quick it can be done, and it's okay if it's quick and dirty during that initial phase.
You just get this like raw, right? This experience, and it's not perfect and it's rough around the edges, but it's an experience you would never have in any other way. Right.
And I can't imagine, I mean, maybe it's the same, but I just don't imagine that being the same at, like, say, Wizards of the Coast. Not taking a crap on them. I love, I mean, I don't play it anymore, but I loved as a kid Magic the Gathering. Dungeons and Dragons is great. I love what that company does. I love Wizard World. They let me do a panel at their thing. Please don't not let me come back to your panels. But I just imagine, like, designing a game for Wizards of the Coast is a completely different experience than maybe designing something either for yourself or for Killjoy or something that's a little bit more indie.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
All right. You know what, Emma, there is so much that I feel like we could have gotten to that we didn't. Because we had that fascinating weather talk at the top of the show.
Very
it was important. We need to let people know that it's save for the earthquakes or the tornadoes rather that you have. Wait, do you have earthquakes too?
A little bit.
Oh my God. I'm so sold off. So save for those two things, Seattle and the Washington area is actually a great place to live from the sounds of it.
Yeah.
And Philadelphia is garbage because of all the snow and literally garbage on the streets. But Emma, why don't you get some plugs out there so people can find your work on social media and the internet and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Emma Larkins pretty much everywhere. My website, emmalarkins.com, connects to most things. I'm most active on Twitter. Very excited to share stuff and just like chat if people have questions on there. So yeah, Emma Larkins on Twitter and Instagram. My game, And Then We Died, should be available through the Killjoy website, but also we're going to be at PAX East. So if you haven't gotten a copy yet, you should grab one there.
And I'm hoping that when we sit down and play that game, everyone is okay with me putting a microphone in the center of the table. And I very much plan on recording it and airing it on this feed at some point. So
I love that.
So I'm hoping that happens.
Nice.
And I'll let you know. I'll tag you, obviously, when that happens.
Sounds good.
And Emma, I hope you come back because I feel like there's so much that we didn't get to talk about with, like, your video game or your digital work, at least, and all that fun stuff. So please come back sometime.
Yeah, this was super fun. I'd love to.
All right, and I'm going to throw it to, this is always the awkward part, I'm going to throw it to me in the past or future or wherever I am.
Thank you to Emma for being on the show. What a great conversation we had. And I'm really excited to sit down. I still haven't had a chance to sit down and play And Then We Died. I've bought a lot of games since PAX 2018, PAX Unplugged 2018. I've bought a lot of games that I have yet to play. But I'm actually sitting down to make plans to play the game that I designed, and a few other games in the next couple months here. So be on the lookout for that because we'll probably sit down and record And Then We Died. And I'm really excited to sit down and play that. And again, apologies to Emma for how long it took to get this episode up. And as I've explained in previous episodes, just kind of a mental break. It happens to the best of us. But we got it out there. Great conversation about game design and stuff. So I don't think we really, that's not a dated conversation. That part of it at the very least. At the time though, I don't believe, she was the host of and I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly, Ludology. So make sure you check that out. Table Takes, LUDOLOGY, and Table Takes as it sounds, table, TAKES. And again, check out emmalarkins.com or at Emma Larkins on Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. Yesterday we posted the State of the Pod, 2019 State of the Pod. Today was Emma's episode. This is the week of awesome, okay, guys? Tomorrow's episode is our Podiversary episode. I'm a big old dummy, and I took notes down for our Philadelphia Podcast Festival show. But if I'm remembering correctly, because this year's Podiversary event was really, really good. It was the 2019 2018 Headstrong, Everything is Awesome Headstrong Comedy Festival. So it was a 4-venue event. I really enjoyed putting it together. If I remember correctly, we actually had, it was obviously Mike was there as my co-host, but we also had my good buddy Garrett Smith on. We sat down and chatted movies, and then we also had a former Philadelphia's Funniest winner, Abby Rosenquist, was also on the show, if I remember correctly. And of course, I don't have any of those plugs in front of me. But we talked movies, we talked comedy, we talked just a lot. I don't know. We talked about good things. Check that out tomorrow. We also have this week coming up on the show, Casey Spivey and the Audio Dungeon right here on awesomepodcast.com. Make sure you find us there or on thatentertains.com/network, where you can find all the great shows on the That's Entertainment podcast network. You know what? We mentioned Casey, including Casey. She has started her own podcast called Wow, Women on Women by The Blonde Jokes. It's her and her comedy partner, Heidi from The Blonde Jokes, sitting around and talking about news and pop culture from a woman's perspective. And it's a really great show. I'm really proud of that show, and I'm so excited that that's part of our network. That launched not long after Casey actually sat down and recorded a podcast with me. So, it was that will be part of tomorrow's conversation. And then, so check that out on thatentertains.com/network, along with all the other great shows, including Everything is Awesome. And if you want to support this show, there's a bunch of ways to do it. Patreon.com/thatnerdykev, Ko-fi.com/thatnerdykev. But if as we say in the outro at the end of the show later, if you can't do it, that's fine. Spread the word. Just tell people about the show. Word of mouth recommendations are actually one of the best ways. And very specifically, those iTunes reviews or Apple Podcast reviews, those 5-star rating and reviews, help us. The more of those we have, the more people that will find the show, and the more people listening to the show, hopefully will lead to us doing cool and fun things like we've done cons at Wizard World and the Great Philadelphia Comic Con, New York Comic Con. Well, I guess we weren't officially part of New York Comic Con that year, but we were there. So come out, support us however you can. Patreon, Ko-fi.com/thatnerdykev on both of those, or just 5-star rating and reviews. Thanks guys for listening, and make sure you stay tuned for tomorrow when we sit down with Garrett Smith from Cinema 76, and of course I Like to Movie, as well as Abby Rosenquist, let's see if I remember this, by way of Austin, by way of Philly, by way of New York, a great comedian that was once part of the Philadelphia comedy scene, right here on awesomepodcast.com. We like to end Everything is Awesome with a call to action. Super friends, there are a lot of terrible things happening in the world right now. It can feel like you can't do anything to help, but you can. It takes people like you and me to make a difference. One of the easiest and most effective ways to action is to call your representatives about issues that are important to you. Issues like LGBTQ rights. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 protects people from discrimination based on race, skin color, sex, religion, and national origin. However, the Act's crucial anti-discrimination provisions do not protect against discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Thus, in the 30 states without robust LGBTQ anti-discrimination laws, LGBTQ people can legally be fired, harassed at work, barred from businesses, denied housing, and more because of their sexual orientation and/or gender identity. On March 13th, 2019, Democrats in the House and Senate introduced H.R. 5, the Equality Act, to remedy the issue. The bill would provide necessary national-level protections for LGBTQ people by updating existing laws like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to explicitly ban discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation. The law would also revise the Civil Rights Act to ban sex-based discrimination in public spaces and services such as retail stores, pharmacies, and transit, as well as in federally funded programs. The Equality Act was first introduced in 2015. Polling demonstrates that majorities of Americans across nearly all demographic groups, including political party, support non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people. Earlier this year, the House passed the Equality Act in a 236 to 173 vote. The legislation now sits with the Senate for consideration. We must capitalize on this momentum to secure national level protections for LGBTQ people and extend protection against sex discrimination beyond federal programs to the private sector. When I call my reps, I use a site called 5calls.org. That's the number 5, calls.org. post-apocalyptic.org. There, you'll find issue summaries for issues that are important to you, contact information for your representatives, and a script to read while you're on the phone to make sure your message gets across. Calling is quick, easy, and is one of the most effective ways to have your voice heard. Thank you to all our supporters on patreon.com/thatnerdykev and ko-fi.com/thatnerdykev. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to bring this awesome episode to you. If you want to support us in a non-monetary way, word-of-mouth recommendations and a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts are the best ways to spread the good word of awesome. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter @RealAwesomePod or @AwesomePodcast on Instagram. We're available on awesomepodcast.com or thatentertains.com/network. Get news about Everything is Awesome from our website, social media accounts, or my personal Twitter @thatnerdykev. You can also join our Discord server at bit.ly/awesomediscord or join our newsletter at bit.ly/thatentertainsnewsletter. If you're interested in ad rates, live appearances, help with your podcast, or have a question or comment, email us at awesome@crudeHumorstudios.com. Everything is Awesome is a production of That's Entertainment Podcast Network in association with Crude Humor Studios. Crude Humor Studios is a Philadelphia-based production company specializing in audio, video, and live performances. You can find more info at crudehumorstudios.com. Thanks for listening, super friends. We've been awesome.
That's Entertainment Podcast Network. Entertainment and culture. Artist-owned, fan-supported.